for the sign that we are live. And here we go. Well, good afternoon on the rainy day now. It feels from Suleimani. The sun comes and goes, but we are excited to be back online with our audience. And today we continue with our webinar series featuring our academic departments, our majors that we present to our audience. So as usual, I'm sharing the slide that here that shows you which webinars have already happened. And we only have 2 departments left that haven't been featured yet. So today, our spotlight will be on our Department of English. And tomorrow is our last webinar where we'll focus on the Department of Social Sciences and Law. And before we start talking about the Department of English, I again want to remind our audience about the big day coming up this Thursday. So that's kind of the culmination of all our webinars. During each webinar, we were featuring a different academic department. But on the University Day, if you come to AUIS campus, you will be able to visit with all the departments at once, learn more about what students have been doing in those departments. You can meet the faculty in person, you can interact with students, and there'll be lots of fun activities that will engage you and even will have some prizes. So Thursday from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m., AUIS community is waiting for you. So please consider and keep the date in mind. And today, our spotlight, as I mentioned, is on our Department of English. And I do want to thank our panelists, our faculty, students, and alum for joining us today. So we have Dr. Ali, the department chair, who will tell you all about the program. We also have another faculty representation, Mr. Stephen, who will share about the program that he's teaching in. We have our alum joining us online all the way from Poland. So Dima, thank you for being with us. And then we have 2 students, Ahmed and Lania. So again, thank you guys for being with us online. So without further ado, Dr. Ali, the floor is yours. The spotlight is on you, and thanks for being here.
Great, cool. Thanks, Isa. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So I'm Ali, I'm the chair of the English department at AUIS. So the big thing about English at AUIS, which I think is quite different about our English department compared to other universities in this region, is that we are not really a language department, despite the title of the department being English. If you really have to kind of boil down what our department is about, we have majors in literature, translation, and journalism, minors in all of those, plus in gender studies. But I always think of our department's sort of mission or philosophy that across all our classes, from the 101 classes to the 400 level classes, our kind of major goal or philosophy is to teach you to develop and warrant your own ideas. Right. The big thing that English does as a department is to make you think beyond what you're given. We have no classes really where there's memorization tests, no classes where knowledge of something having happened is what you're doing. It's really a skills department. And the skill mainly is arguing beyond what has already been thought. So your job, if you work in this department, is think something new, right? Add something to the fields of literature or of journalism or of translation. So our students will hopefully be able to tell you whether we live up to that in practice slightly later. But yeah, that's what we aim for, at least. So the big thing is, if you think about AUIS, you've probably seen if you've watched any of these other webinars, the university talks a lot about critical thinking as one of the great sort of shared outcomes across all our departments. And the big thing is that's a hard term to define. People mean different things by critical thinking. But I think English is really at the heart of that. In our core program, we are the department where every class has learning outcomes at the level of create. To get the credit in the class, to pass the classes, you have to be creating something new. You've got to look at what has already been done in the field. Imagine my argument class, for example, you read other people's arguments. The job is not to remember what they said and understand it. The job is to understand it so well that you can argue beyond it, show how you can do better. So everything you get credit for in all our classes across the English department is for having your own ideas and going beyond what other people have already known. So if that's something that appeals to you, come here and study English, right? So I'll sort of talk you through very briefly, like our three classes that everybody has to take at AUAS, and then our three majors, literature, translation, and journalism. I'm a literature person. Stephen is a literature and a journalism person, so he can tell us about that. And then we've got one student from each field. So Deem is a literature person, Ahmed's a translation person, and Lanya is a journalism minor who's stepping in at the last minute because our excellent journalism graduate, Hazala, is sick today, unfortunately. So the three-class course sequence, right? Every student at AUAS has to take 3 writing classes. And these are English 101, which is argument, English 102, which is critical reading and writing, and English 203, which is research and project writing. So to go through those really simply, argument, the English 101 class, that's what me and Stephen both teach mainly. And that is mainly teaching you from nothing to the ability to argue beyond anything that you read. So how do you work out what's useful and right in particular arguments? How do you see where people's reasoning is going wrong? And then how can you use logic, evidence, expression to create something new that goes beyond them? So the goal is by the end of that first writing class at the university, you're already in the position where you are able to argue beyond anything that you read. That's a high standard, and I think students find it quite a challenging class, but that's the basic idea, to be able to take what's already out there and go beyond it. Stephen can tell you some more. English 102 then is related, but it builds on it in a slightly different way. English 101 is about explicit arguments, right? If people say something directly and they give this specific reason, how should we handle that? How should we go beyond it? English 102, though, is more about understanding how communication happens at the implicit level. So how do things get communicated without being explicitly said? So think, for example, about how artworks may communicate a feeling or an idea without necessarily telling you what they're trying to make you feel or think. Manipulative arguments might try to make you believe something without telling you they're trying to make you believe it. And so English 102 is about handling those kinds of things, how to see what is communicated implicitly and how to still be able to argue explicitly and clearly and rationally about that kind of thing. And then English 203 is research and project writing. And what we mean by this is it's basically a rehearsal for every department having a capstone where at the end of your undergraduate career, you do a sort of a full research project that takes a whole semester where you're meant to be adding something to your field. And English 203 is basically just practice in that. So like with English 101, pick a question, see if you can answer it better than anybody, but there's a much higher standard of research, a much sort of fuller engagement with everything that's ever been written on the topic. And English 203 is kind of teaching you to do that kind of project-based work, whether you're an engineer doing kind of lab-based projects or whether you're an English person doing interpretation or argument-based projects. English 203 teaches you how to write in all of those genres. So I will stop at that point and ask Stephen if he has anything to add, because like I say, Stephen is also a department member who has something to say about the department philosophy, and he's also an instructor in our 3 core classes who probably has something to say about those. So Stephen, what did I miss and what would you add?
That's right. Thanks so much, Ali. I think I would just chime in with what I think you would expect as a student coming into the department, coming into, frankly, any major field, because you'll be taking a core class, which is English 101, whether it's with Dr. Ali, whether it's with myself. The idea of knowing your reasons and knowing how to justify your beliefs is very much what I focus on in English 101. And we break it down into the building blocks of how is it that logic works, for example. Even though some people come into an English class expecting, okay, we're reading and writing, and we absolutely do that in my class, but we actually do a lot of what's called logic mapping, which is taking, let's say, a belief that you may have, asking yourself, why do you believe it? Why do you have this particular opinion about this particular contentious topic of debate? And then breaking it down into the reasons for why you believe that. And sometimes those reasons have reasons. And so it ends up with a nice visual diagram of your own thinking and your own ideas. So just to tie into the philosophy aspect of what the value is of an English class or an English major for that matter, it's actually a little bit of knowing yourself and knowing why you think what you think and making sure you have a good foundation for your beliefs, which also helps with, for example, persuading other people. And that ends up being another half of the class, which is where we actually have debates with other students in the class. As much as we do it in writing and in responding to the readings that are assigned, we also have lots of engaged debates on all sorts of contentious, hot button issues in class in a respectful manner, of course, but it always ends up being a favorite part of the class for my students. All of that's to say that, if you're someone who's interested in figuring out why you believe things or why other people believe things, and hopefully getting those sorts of skills of rhetoric and persuasion down as well, that tends to be a useful class to take, which is why it's a core requirement for all of our students. But that's just a little bit I wanted to add with regard to the English 101, which all of you would be taking coming into AUAS at some point. So.
Yeah, and I would just sort of add to that as well that as Stephen mentioned, like we discuss controversial issues and so on, right? The way that we try to teach in English is you decide what you want to write about, right? Because we're not trying to teach you, you must know this topic, you must know this topic. We're teaching you skills that you have to have, but skills that should be able to apply to any topic. So English is very, very open. I guess Dima and Ahmed and Lanya can maybe talk about that and how they found it when they studied. But yeah, you follow your own interests. The standards are not, write about a particular topic in a particular way. It's have certain skills that you can apply to anything, and you get to choose the anything, really. So then to move on to our actual programs, right? Those 3 core classes are things that everybody has to take, but then our majors and minors are things that you select into. So when it comes to the 3 majors, I'll very quickly go over them and just sort of describe, what they involve and what kind of people might be interested in each one. So as I said, I'm a literature person, as is Stephen. And our literature degree basically requires understanding how creative language use actually works in practice, right? So you read complex pieces of imaginative fiction, we read poetry, we read various things that teach you the history of literature, we read various things about, let's say, for example, literary theory, where you're trying to work out at a deep level what are the sort of the underpinnings of how language and literature and things like that actually work. And so I would say people who would be interested in studying literature, yeah, if you are interested in abstract ideas, if you like working on thoughts or pieces of language, constructions of concepts or whatever that nobody has ever thought about before, and then how do you actually make sense of these things, right? Can we be concrete and accurate about how creativity and language and innovation in language work in the world? Literature might be interesting to you. There's also a sort of a heavy dimension of culture in this, right? How does literature relate to the kind of the societies it comes from? Secondly, there's our translation program. So Ahmed will talk about translation later, but our translation program teaches people translation from Kurdish Arabic or Kurdish and Arabic into and out of English. And translation, yeah, we have, specialized, we have some introductory technique classes. We have specialized classes like legal translation and medical translation, a very good literary translation program that has led to people getting books published. So translation, I would say, who should be interested in translation? Well, yeah, if you're interested in like the differences between culture, the ways that whatever similarities we might have in common as human beings, there are certain things where the way that you're brought up or the language that you speak or the culture you come from make it impossible for you to completely interact with somebody else with no barriers in the middle. The translator is the person who then says, great, well, if there is this sort of impossible equivalence between 2 things, what's the closest we can get to making people intelligible to each other? So again, Ahmed can tell you more about how that works. But I think, yeah, if you're interested in cultural difference, and especially in the sort of the complexities of language and linguistics, then translation may be the program for you. And then with journalism, I'll really pass that over to Stephen, because Stephen teaches in journalism, and I teach just one class, which is more of a literature class, really anyway, on arts writing and how to write about the arts. But basically, I think journalism teaches 2 really important skills. One is it's about outward expression. So if you're somebody who wants to actually communicate your ideas clearly to a wider public, journalism is the right field to take for that. A lot of our journalism students have graduated and actually gone now to work for people like ISTA in admissions and communications at universities. And the second thing, though, the one thing that robots will never replace is journalism is about discovering new information that nobody has ever found, right? So about going out and doing the reporting. If there's corruption going on, you have to be the person who actually goes and finds that and documents it and discovers it. If there is an interesting secret history to a story that everybody thinks they know, you're the person who has to go out and dig around and actually justify it and say, here's the evidence. So journalism is partly about discovery, partly about uncovering new knowledge, and partly about outward communication. But Stephen can say a lot more about it, so I'll pass it over to Stephen.
Yeah, thanks so much. Absolutely. So journalism, particularly in the class that I teach, which is the Journalism 301, the reporting class, it's very hands-on. So a lot of the stuff you do, for example, in a literature class or in a translation class, tends to be more, let's say, based on work that you do in the class or homework, let's say. Whereas in journalism, it's very much about field work. It's about going out into the world and telling stories that need to be told. One of the skills that I try to cultivate in students in this class is actually being able to see stories, being able to see the fact that stories are everywhere, recognize them. Oftentimes we're put in a position, maybe you might relate to this, of having a very interesting story happen to someone you know, or maybe in your own life, and not necessarily not having an outlet or not having a way to communicate that to the broader world. And so journalism is the art of telling people's stories in a way that is captivating, that is engaging to a broader community, and so serves the community's needs as well. So noticing stories in the world, sending them out to tell stories, whether it's investigative deep dives into sort of controversial topics happening, whether it's more casual feature type writing. We end up at the end of this class with a portfolio of work that the student has, art reports that they've put together, and also attempts to send those out before the class ends to get them published somewhere. So it's very hands-on, it's very practical, and it's very much about getting into the world, doing your own fact finding, doing your own investigating, your own research, and putting it together in a way that in a package that is communicable, that translates to other people's and readers' interests and needs too. So being able to be a bridge between the story you're covering and also the broader world is, I think, a very valuable generalizable life skill. And if it's something that you like to do or are interested in doing, I highly recommend you take it, even as an elective. But that tends to be my sort of ballpark, is the Journalism 301 class. A little bit to give you a bit more grit about what journalism looks like in a classroom and in practice.
Yeah, cool. And then, so the one other thing to mention is minors, right? So in our department, we have you can do a minor in any of those three things. And a minor at AUAS, which students often don't know when they come here, is basically 5 classes in the field. So not a complete major, but 5 classes should, we think, be enough to give you a kind of a recordable, certifiable skill in that field. So if you want to do whatever your major may be, you can do a minor in literature or journalism or translation on top of it. So Lanya, for example, who's joining us today, is mainly an IS major, but she's a journalism minor, so she can talk about how. And Hozak, our IT person who's online, he's an IT person now at AUAS, but he was an English minor who took 2 classes with me from my memory. So you can maybe hopefully hear from them about how they found minoring. But I would always suggest that you should minor in something, right? I think AUAS gives you this opportunity to kind of spread your brain in different directions. And the suggestion that I always make to people is take the minor that is furthest away from your major, right? I think often people think, great, I'll use the minor as a way to kind of push deeper into the hole that my major has already dug for me. But I think if you have a brain that can do 2 kinds of thinking, then that is much more valuable than a brain that can do one thing very narrowly but very deeply. So my suggestion to English majors is always they should do the maths minor. I don't think anybody has actually taken me up on this yet, but I keep on asking and I keep on hoping. If I had done this when I was this age, I would have done a double major in English and philosophy. I would have done a minor in maths to go with it. I went to the British system, so I had no such choice. But yeah, so do the minor that is furthest away from your major. That's always my suggestion. And I think English is generally the furthest away minor from almost every other major at the university. So let's say engineering or medical lab science, where you're working with very determinate things, with very kind of right or wrong judgments at certain times, but also whether you can benefit a lot from creativity, right? Engineering benefits a lot from the ability to kind of solve problems and think what wasn't there before. And literature kind of trains those skills, but with incredibly different material, right? Conceptual, abstract kinds of things. So I would definitely say whatever your major is, consider minoring in something. And generally, I think you'll find that the English department minors are actually really interestingly different and interestingly brain stretching compared to almost everything else at the university. And I almost forgot, we have one program in the department which is just a minor, which is gender studies. And this is something that works across fields. So if you're interested in the relationship between men and women, how society defines masculinity and femininity, what this has to do with the way the world runs, then consider the gender studies minor. It's taught across departments. So we have literature things, we have social science things, we have public health classes that address this. So the gender minor is a really good way to sort of think systematically about ideas and society and how it works in a way that kind of crosses departmental barriers. And I think that's always a good thing, because again, I believe in stretching your brain. So at this point, I guess we should hand over to the students, but I do want to mention at some point the kind of things that our majors and minors go on to do. But so I'm looking to Eyster. So should I do that now, or should I wait till we get to alumni?
Let's wait until we get to the alumni, so that will bring you back. But thank you so much for this overview. I think you did truly break a lot of stereotypes, because many students often imagine English program is all about coming and studying English. So thank you for highlighting exactly what the possibilities are, what type of personalities could be interested in the program. So I hope that is very educational. And just a reminder to the audience that if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the comments and we'll gladly answer the questions live. So let's go directly to the students. And Ahmed, let's put you now in front of our audience to share about why you chose your degree program, right? How did you come to AUAS, and how has that experience been for you?
Well, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank my the faculty and the colleagues as well, and especially Dr. Mr. Aysen for this great opportunity to be here live as a webinar for as an iOS students. Well, actually, my experience at iOS, it has its own uniqueness, and also as I believe that as long as someone want to stretch his own capability in a way that being able to understand how the world is, let's say, on the politically is characterized, and as well as in the world of translation. So I will just narrow it down into the field of translation. Personally, like I have worked in many other places, even during my teenage age, as someone who just being able to talk a little bit of English language. But that good thing that got me into something bigger, which is joining iOS. And as I always call it, the big dream, as I always dreamt about, is to be someone who, let's say, kind of specialized in a way that how people are actually interacting with each other and communicating, due to the fact that, by having like, I've lived and raised like in Kurdistan, and they talk their own language. So I thought it might be a good idea to learn their own language and being able to transfer within the Arabic version. So immediately once I got into iOS, I'm so thankful in depth to those people who were like, part of from this journey by allowing me to study at iOS, specifically, not without being, saying like, Mr. Christian, Dr. Ali, Mr. Steven, and also I would like to mention Dr. Jamalia and Dr. Kazi for being able all this time to stretch and, allow me to study this major as long as I always preferred. In translation major, you will be able not only to be able to transfer language into different language, or more likely, first of all, you have to learn the techniques and strategies, how to be able to, transfer language into another language without losing its meaning and within its intrinsic semantics. So that goes with Dr. Kazi. I went to her through a lot of courses. For example, if you are interested in medical translation, you can easily take that course. Even you can take it as a minor in translation field. And also we have legal translation, where it's basically talks about politics and laws. And as a student who is like coming from a family who are interested in politics, so I said, wait, Ahmed, I think it's a good idea to get into the field of translation and being able to be entailed within the law from another path, which is not studying law by itself. No, take a translation and you can play your own crucial role in the world of politics or law, whatever. And also we have another, translation course, which is called consecutive translation and interpreting translation. The main goal of those courses is actually not only, being able to translate, it's more being able to know what's going on in the field of translation, as well as like my future plan. Let's say once I get done with getting a bachelor degree in translation, I will go immediately and, seeking for a master degree, because that will allow me to be able, that person who would be, let's say, not from the, being famous, but I would say just being so smart and education in the field of translation, as long as I have the help, the autonomous amount of help from my faculty. And also I would like to mention that the community of iOS are actually exceptional. Each one of them has his own thoughts, his own perspective on the way that he thinks, which allow people to being able not to stick into one idea. We're more likely to have more controversial ideas, and this will also add into your own personality in the future. And thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. So
Well
just
done.
to clarify, so your major is in journalism, right? And
I'm in translation major.
oh, sorry, translation.
Yeah.
Yes, of course,
Yeah.
you're talking about translation. Sorry,
Yeah.
I keep in mind knowing that Lania will be next to talk about journalism. So
Cool.
you're a translation major, and do you have a minor?
Yes, I do have a minor. I thought it could be a good idea to talk a minor that is somehow close to your major, so I chose literature. And
So
literature.
you didn't listen to Dr. Ali at all. But I mean, that kind of worked well along with your translation degree, and then in the going the literature path.
It helped me a lot.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing and highlighting the courses that you have taken, and all the best. I know you have one semester left to go, so then of course it's planning on to for your master's studies. So we wish you all the best in that. So now let's switch gears into journalism. So Lania, you have your minor in journalism, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and your major is in what?
My major is international studies and minoring in law and journalism.
Okay. So if you could share about your decision to choose this as a minor, and what has the experience been, and what have you appreciated the most? And I know you have only had 2 semesters, right, of classes, so you're still not finished with the journey, but we are very eager to hear from your experience.
Actually, if I talk about my previous time of university, I was always curious about the news. I was always listening to people, politicians, what they were saying, what were journalists writing about the situations that was happening and the situations that the people were in Kurdistan, and what they were writing. I was always thinking about if that's true or not, or like how did they get to that point to write about this based on what they wrote this. I was always reading those stuffs and listening to the politicians. I was always wondering if what they are saying is true or not. And when I came to this university, actually at first I joined joined the major of software engineering, but later I decided to change it at the very beginning of the semesters, because I said why not to work on something that I'm always curious about. And I chose journalism minor because I could understand what I read after that. So now whatever I read in any article or report, I understand based on what and how did they write those stuff. And like those classes always improve our critical thinking. Before these classes, I never knew what is critical thinking and how to improve our writings, how to write. I actually didn't know how to write anything, but now I know how to write any report about any situations, any occasion that happens in the city. It's very interesting for me from that point that I reached this point for now that I even can publish my writings. People are asking me to publish my writings. And so like the classes generally is very interesting to me to that point when we don't have to memorize anything. All we have to do is to think and to analyze and to put our understanding of the every aspect of that occasion that happens. So what we think and our perspectives, it's all about that, and how we improve our perspective to the right ones. How do we see, like we analyze ourselves, we think about what we say is true or not, what we see is the right thing or not. That's very interesting for me. And there's a lot to say, but I want to leave it for my colleagues and you.
Thank you so much, Lania. The way you talk, it's like you can already hear the journalistic mind and thinking going through and analyzing all the situations. And I really hope that, you know, your testimony of how you even came with a software engineering goal for studies, and how you absolutely changed your direction and basically listening to your heart, to your mind in what you were interested to study.
Every student when finished 12th grade and thinking about coming to the university, they go listen to the other people's opinion, what they think is the best. They always choose that. And for the beginning of the like for the first semester of mine, I decided based on people's opinion. They were telling me that this major is very important, is very, like, I don't say it's not important, but it was not for me. I only tried the first class of it and I failed that class. But when I came to my own interests and did this major and chose the minors of mine, I enjoyed doing them. Even though if, I didn't get a full mark in all of my assignments, I enjoyed it still. I was learning from it. But for that, I have like practiced the path and practice the classes. I couldn't do it, so I decided to go back to my own interest and what I feel will make me something in the future, will make me improve myself in it and be something actually in that area of working.
Absolutely. And this is where I'm saying, like, you are the best example of being brave and doing exactly, pursuing what you are interested in and not necessarily giving in to the peer pressure. But during all the webinars, we actually emphasize that advantage of the AUS educational model, that students do have that flexibility, that you can take, you can have up to 3 semesters in which a student can change their mind once. So when you come in, and if you see that that's not the right program for you, this is the opportunity to change it and to even do the combination with the minor, just as Dr. Ali had mentioned. I actually would like now to call the person who has been always hiding on our webinars behind the AUIS Zoom picture. So Hodak, first of all, a huge thanks to you for all the IT support during all the webinars. But today we do want to put you in the spotlight because you are one of those unique combinations where you chose your major in IT and yet you did your minor in English, right? So
Yeah,
please
English literature, yes.
tell us about your degree. How did you decide on that combination? And what has been the value that now you see you are working, you have your career. So speak a bit about your experience.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for having me today. My story goes back to 2017. When we started, I just graduated APP and we were about to start UG. And then the nice thing about AUIS, we have talked about this over and over again in the previous webinar, that it allows you to choose your major. But beside that, when you start UG, they give you orientations and you go to all different departments and they give you a brief introduction about their majors, minors, and what they do, what they teach. And I was sure about IT, but I was not sure about my minor. And the usual combination was always IT business and IT business. And I was like, why is everyone going to business and not choosing other minors? And when we went to the classroom and Dr. Ali was there and he was explaining English literature, English minor, English major, and it caught my interest right there because as he said, the whole goal is thinking about what hasn't already been thought about. And that was the key for me because in IT, IT is really very, very practical. But what you need is the theoretical part as well, because that's where you find solutions to problems. That's where you do your analysis, where you do go find very little details. And this has helped me a lot in my current job because I'm an IT support admin at AUIS. I graduated class 2021, and then I started being an IT support here at AUIS. And what has this helped me? How this has helped me a lot? It was through it, the English minor enhanced my communication skills. It helped me a lot to be persuasive, and which is very important because at a professional job market, you always have these big meetings with a lot of stakeholders, with a lot of other staff, and this needs such, let's say, meetings need people who are good in communication and how to persuade others when let's say you have a project to implement, how to persuade others to implement this project. Why is it important, and what are let's say the advantages and disadvantages? This is one part, and we have always talked about critical thinking, but we missed one big part, which is analysis. And in English, so the theoretical part is about being very analytical, and that's where let's say you have this bunch of a lot of readings and essays, and you're exposed to different cultures, different subjects and topics, and they ask you these big questions to make you critically think, but also analyze. And this is the most important value and for me, because currently at my job I use that a lot. And another thing is writing proficiently, and this was this is another thing about English. They help you to not only analyze, but how to like, let's say, construct your ideas and construct your analysis and put it on paper, let's say. And I love writing, and currently, like personally, I write stories on the side, but at work, everyone hates me because I write a lot. I write a lot of reports. I write on a lot of emails, long emails. They say, hey, this is a lot. We cannot keep up with your emails and reports. And so this is like the benefits and the values that I got in IT, like with the combination of minoring in English and IT. So let me not take a lot of time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hodak. I think, you know, we say it's always surprising to find an IT person in the industry who's not just hiding behind the computer, but can express himself or herself clearly and can write very comprehensive emails and can have the communication skills. So you are definitely the example of the benefit of that combination of the major and minor. And so kudos to you and thank you for sharing your experience.
You're welcome.
I do want Dr. Ali to put you back on the spotlight. We do have one question online, so I'll give you the question and then I will allow you to speak about the graduates and kind of lead and introduce Dima. But the question is, does leadership solely relate to learning? So I think it's because we've talked and the students keep talking and I think their leadership potential is just shining through. So the question is, does leadership solely relate to learning?
What was the second? Yeah, so I came downstairs. Vanya, turn your volume down.
Sorry.
So one sec, Vanya. Yeah, so sorry.
It's all good. So the question from our
because...
audience on Facebook is, does leadership solely relate to learning?
Oh, so Vanya, if you can turn the volume down. Turn your volume down. Sorry, one second. I came downstairs because my battery was running out. So I saw that Lanya was here, so I can come to, okay.
Well, and maybe Stephen, if you want to jump in, if you have an answer, so we can also have.
So we sorted that out. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so sorry about that. So yeah, so the question was, does leadership solely relate to learning? I think was that the idea. Yeah, I think leadership is a really kind of interesting concept. I think we have a class in leadership in our business department, I think. And I've always sort of been kind of dubious about whether leadership is something that you can teach, right? I think you probably discover whether you can be a leader in the sort of the situation of being put into it. But I mean, I think in terms of our department, that there are things that we teach, let's say, that would help people become leaders. I think for a while the AOAS motto at one point was maybe I'm mixing it with my old university, but like leaders and best. And I think one way that you can think about this, I think, is the kind of thing that we teach our students to do, to be able to think beyond what other people had previously written and to be able to actually determine and justify. Remember I said, develop and warrant your own ideas. So if you're somebody who can do that, right? If you're somebody who in the face of pressure or in the face of, conflict or difficulty or something, can still be confident enough in yourself to say, no, I've actually worked out what the right thing to do here is, right? I've kind of looked at what's already out there and I've determined that it's not good enough, and I've worked out how I can justify going on and doing something of my own. I think that's a really important thing. And I think that's something that you can, maybe some people have that more naturally, that's not a sort of a learning based thing, but we do as much as we possibly can at this university to help all of our students gain those skills, that kind of self-confidence where you're not relying on other people's judgment or relying on convention or tradition to work out what you should believe, but you've actually kind of justified it for yourself. And I think probably my thinking is, the people who I've met in my life who I respect as leaders in some way, those are the people, right? The people who actually know why they think what they think and make decisions based on their own understanding of things, compared to, people who just say, well, this is the way we've always done it or something. So I think my sense is leadership may be sort of natural in some respects, but it's also something which you can definitely practice more. And I think if a key part of it is to be able to sort of think for yourself and justify why you're doing what you're doing, that's something that you can learn, and it's something that we try to teach in all our classes in our department, I think. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. That answers, and actually it's a very nice leeway to talk now about the achievements of our graduates, and especially talking about English department graduates. And I know you, as many department chairs, about boasting about the alumni, but you are especially so connected with your graduates and you follow their success stories. So I think that leadership element and that theme also weaves in very nicely. So if you could highlight maybe where do your graduates go to, and then lead into Dima's success story, and then Dima will be very glad to hear from you. Oh, please unmute yourself, Dr. Ali.
Okay, so yes, so I've got my written down thing because we have so many successful students that I couldn't remember them all. I had to actually sort of read it off a page. So apologies if this is sort of clunky and awkward. But yeah, so we've never had a translation graduate yet. Ahmed will be our first graduated translation student, but we've had lots of people graduate in English and journalism. So I wanted to sort of talk you through some basics about their career outcomes. So one thing is that I've tried to do the maths. 93% of our graduates are either studying MAs or PhDs abroad or full-time employed, often abroad as well. The only people I think who are not included in that are people who have had babies and are currently sort of sitting at home raising babies. So that is a kind of work in itself, right? So I count that as successful outcomes from the English department. But basically, yeah, I can try and give you some specific examples. So we have people who are doing MAs right now or who just finished in Sweden, the Czech Republic, in Germany, at Harvard and Boston universities in America. Dima will talk about doing her master's in Poland. We have people who studied in Britain as well. So generally, a lot of our people go on to study, Holland as well. A lot of people go on to study abroad. I think we're a very good academic department, and I think that means that a lot of our students are very well prepared to go on and be successful in academic programs elsewhere. But beyond that, I'll give you some kind of a sense of what a few people have done. I'm going to kind of go chronologically because I think one thing with English is there's no such job as an Englisher, right? So what often happens is you graduate and it takes 1 or 2 years. You kind of weave a path before you find the thing that you're going to go fully into. So as you see as I go down, you'll hopefully see that the people who've been out in the world for 3 or 4 years, like Dima, have been able to find very sort of solid positions. So one of our recent graduates is a research analyst at an NGO in Erbil. Another one works as a recruiter for Kurdsat, the radio station. One of them is the director of communications for USAID in Erbil. Who else? Yeah, strange one is one of our British Kurdish students now runs one of the largest supermarkets in London. Which English must be helping her with that in some way. We have somebody who worked as a journalistic fixer in Iraq and just recently got sort of headhunted to go and work in radio journalism in Germany. Hazala, who was meant to be joining us today, very, very good journalism graduate from Shingal. Hazala works now as one of the main leaders of what they call the Youth Bridge organization, which is a major NGO out in the Yazidi part of the country. She does a lot of international collaboration work and stuff, and her journalism background is fundamental to that, right? It's a communications kind of a job. We have people working at the Vim Foundation as translators. Gira, who works also as a journalist, just set up a research institute at the Vim Foundation that's been working with CNN, the American TV station. We have people who are editing. Sipa, I think, is now working as an editor of a newspaper in Kirkuk because she's interested in kind of disputed territories and things like that. And then a couple of other people, I wanted to mention some of what our minors do as well, because lots of our minors get jobs related to the minor, not the major. So Hozak is working in IT, having been an IT major, but we have people, for example, who've gone on to do MAs in Kurdish studies. Dalia was an English minor who went back to Sweden, is now doing an MA in English. Shay works as the international, she's an engineering major, she works as the international liaison and the sort of the international translation communication person for an engineering company in Basra. Dia, who is also an engineering major, journalism minor, she works as the communications assistant at this university. So lots of people who start with majors in, let's say, software engineering or MLS or engineering, but get minors in the English things, end up getting jobs related to their English minor because this kind of international ability to communicate across barriers is a really fundamental thing. So I'll sort of leave off the description of various, jobs and things there, because you can talk to Dima, who's one of our people who's successfully gone abroad and done very well in graduate study. But again, if anybody has any questions about specific kind of career paths and outcomes, our English department is very well employed, and especially on the academic side, if you're interested in going to study abroad, I think we have the highest rate of study abroad of all our graduates at the whole university. So that's a thing that we specialize in and that people have been very successful in, like Dima.
Thank you. So Dima, this is a perfect now presentation time for you. So you are our last presenter, and we are very eager to hear of your story. how has the AUIS English degree prepared you for your career path? So please share with us, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. So it's interesting that the last question we received is about leadership, because what I actually do right now is in leadership. So I work in an American corporate, so international corporate in Poland, but it also has different, basically it's a global company. So different places in Europe and elsewhere. So I work in operations as a team leader. And it's quite connected. I'm basically maybe the opposite of Hazak's story. So English versus IT, because I work in an IT company, and my company provides basically tech services to global companies. So yeah, how is English connected to what I do for a living? So basically, it touches upon what Dr. Ali was talking about, all of the interpersonal skills that I developed while being an English student. So it's also connected to what Lania was saying, because when I started my AUIS journey, I was meant to study either IT or engineering. So it was not in my plan to study English literature. And then after taking the first English 101, writing 101 classes, that's when I decided that IT or engineering is not for me, so I have to go with English. It was just my cup of tea. So what kind of skills did I develop, or did I train during my journey at AUIS? So again, it's basically the interpersonal skills. So as a team leader, something that meant that I would get promoted, because when I first started with the company that I work for, I was basically an entry level. And then after 9 months, I was instantly promoted to a team leader, and that was quite the record. And the reason that happened is because of the interpersonal skills that I had. So I know that we do not want to focus so much on that, but there is the fact that my English fluency definitely improved, because in my classes, in my literature classes, I had to constantly talk about what I think, why I think it, and also writing. So I developed definitely in terms of verbal and writing skills. And so there is the communication part as well. So all of the basically the empathy that I developed, and that was the result of writing and reading about a lot of text. Because see, when we were in classes and we were talking about, I don't know, any literary text, it's not similar to tackling a mathematical equation. You have to actually challenge your own belief system, and you have to understand why this text is written in that way and find a meaning of it. And so basically these combination of skills meant that as a team leader, I would be very beneficial for the company in terms of holding meetings, being able to using my communication skills so that I can deliver important points, especially that the client that we work for is such an important client. So part of what I do for a living is to ensure that all of the communication is delivered correctly. There is no room for miscommunication, and also dealing with conflict resolution, and all of these basically interpersonal skills that I do not think I would have developed so much if not for the English department. And there was such a bonus for me, because when I joined AUIS, the English department is still kind of developing. So we were not a lot of students. So I don't know how it is today. I hope we have more students, but I think it boils down to the common understanding that people do not go for private universities to study English literature. So even when I changed my major, it was not very well accepted by my own family. So I had to kind of be insistent on my decision. And by the time I graduated in 2018, I remember that I was the only graduate. And there was a huge benefit to that, because in the English department, we were quite like a family, and all of the professors were assisting one another. And fun fact, I never had any class with Dr. Ali, but he remembers me and he knows me. And that is because when I had the idea of starting the creative writing club, and Dr. Ali was the first one who was always supporting and having and attending the communication workshop. So this is basically an example of how English professors were always supporting one another, and I do not remember ever needing support without instantly receiving an answer. And that was such a bonus, because it meant that as a person, as an introvert especially, I was forced to get out of my comfort zone and to be more social. And this is something that also meant that I would become a team leader today, because it's not very common that an introvert would be a team leader, and I am quite enjoying it. So yes.
Wonderful. I just want to kind of, so you graduated in 2018 with a degree in English literature, right?
Yes,
But
yes.
then you went on to further studies. So
Yes.
where did you go and what did you study?
All right, so right after graduating in 2018, I went to Poland to study my master's degree in English philology. And there's also a fun fact there, because Dr. Ali also mentioned that in writing classes, there is no strict basically instructions on what kind of topics that we have to write about. And I remember when I came to Poland to study at the University of Wrocław, I wanted to talk specifically about Iranian graphic novels, and there was no supervisor who would accept that. But I was so insisting, because I got used to having kind of an open-minded kind of atmosphere at AUIS. So I expected the same thing here, but it was not so instantly. So I eventually wrote my my research paper on Iranian graphic novels, but I had to rely specifically on my own research skills. So this is also something that was connected to what I received at AUIS in the English department, because I am also a combination of Lania and Ahmed, because I also took translation classes, journalism classes, so tour reporting. So I was basically insisting on having a variety of classes within the English major. So yeah.
Well, talk about leadership, right? And pushing for the things you're passionate about, and in doing what you believe in. So wonderful. But we also know that you do have now a path outlined for yourself for PhD studies. So do share what's next for you.
All right, so this was basically an idea that I postponed for a while. I applied for University of Manchester, and I got the acceptance to study at Arabic Studies PhD. And I had in mind a research paper on specifically Iraqi literature, because I feel that up until now, this is kind of an area that is not that is a bit understudied. So I want to talk more about Arabic literature, and I want to specifically have the supervision of people who are expert, because it's understudied. So that means most of the research will depend on me and the supervisor. So yeah, hopefully this will be happening soon. Different paths, different kind of projects keep interrupting, but we'll see how it goes. Thank you.
As long it's like you don't stop dreaming and you are following what is close to your heart, that's important. So just a last follow-up question. You mentioned that your parents weren't happy with your initial AUIS degree in literature, and that was strange for them to understand. What do your parents think of your career and your educational path now?
Well, they are very proud, specifically my father, and he was the person who was not very agreeable, which was strange to me, because he is a novelist and I've always wanted to be a writer. So I wanted to follow his path, but he was more leaning towards engineering or IT. But right now he's probably the most proud parent. So yeah, he approves. He approves of the change.
Wonderful. And that's what, again, I think today we just talking about the English department, we touched on so many other subtopics of leadership, of following your heart and being brave enough to make the decisions and listening to your own interests and skills and talents. So thank you all for sharing all of this information, for being with us today. But Dr. Ali, I do want to give you the last minute of kind of wrapping this up and saying the final comments, and maybe finishing up of why English department at AUIS.
Yeah, cool. So Yeah, so apologies again that my computer ran out, so I'm now on Lanya's computer. Thanks, Lanya. I recognized that she was in the library, which is the right place to be speaking this from. So why English? I think because our department, as Dima said, is very sort of friendly. You get a lot of individualized attention and work with your professors. We have classes here that are unique to this university, right? I teach a class on literature and psychology, which I don't think actually exists at any other university in the world. So you have, people with expertise and interesting topics and so on, where you can work. We have a heavy focus on teaching you to think for yourself and to go beyond what's already out there. So if you're the kind of person, as I was when I was choosing where to go for university, who has no interest in going along with what other people think, and who just thinks the point is to be a better individual rather than sort of going along with what anybody else tells you to think, then our department is very amenable to that kind of attitude, I suppose. So if you're somebody who naturally disagrees with what's around you and kind of wants to practice becoming better at disagreeing with it and better at building some alternative, then the English department is, I guess, the place to be. And I really wanted to finish up actually just one very last thing by sort of talking about, to give you an example of the kind of stuff that our students go on and develop into. Tomorrow we have a mini conference for our graduating students who are going to be presenting their capstone projects, like the sort of the final projects that they do in English. So I just wanted to kind of run those 6 projects by you all and see, if these sound like the kind of things you would like to work on, things that you might find interesting to eventually end up studying, then yeah, come to our English department. I'm working now with one student who did her capstone last semester to kind of co-author a paper and turn it into a publication in a journal. I think our graduates end up doing very good work that's actually kind of like internationally academically respectable. So so this semester, Ahmed can tell you a little bit about his, because he's one of these people. That Ahmed's translation final project is about translating things about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict into Arabic and how to kind of preserve Eastern European cultural specificity in the Arabic language. Lara is writing about doppelganger stories and how stories of doppelgangers help extend our ideas about how we perceive ourselves beyond what clinical psychology is able to think about. Soline is writing about like double people and sort of the divided self in Dostoevsky, the Russian novelist. Asma is writing about the kind of the inheritance of Franz Kafka's ideas about alienation and how Kafka's kind of model gets picked up and made unique in Kurdish literature. Hashim, who's a journalism student, is writing about he's analyzing Eastern, as he calls it, Eastern and Western journalistic responses to the Yazidi genocide and seeing how the Western kind of representation of the genocide distorts things and kind of over statisticifies things and emphasizes things that do not actually help Yazidi people when they're reported on in this way. And I think one more to go. Yeah, Shad. And Shad is writing about ideas of conformity and disability and so on in speculative fiction by Black American writers. So it's a very wide array of stuff, but all of these are really solidly thought out topics. And the big thing, which I think embodies us as a department, is that they are all things that nobody else in the world has ever written about before, right? They're all things that are genuinely like new to the world, new to the field, new to academia, new to the intellectual life. And yeah, that's the kind of stuff that we hope to train you to do. So if that's the kind of thing you want to do by the time you've graduated, come study with us. We'll be very happy to see you. Okay.
Thank you so much, because I mean, truly, I think this has been probably the best promotion and the best highlight of all of the strength of the department. It's been amazing to see the passion flowing through all your words and your smiles. So thank you for sharing that with our audience. And I do hope that the audience did get all of the information and just kind of confirmation that English department offers so many possibilities, so many creative paths, and so many possibilities after graduation. And it's definitely not the department where you come and you learn English, but it's so much more. So reminder that Thursday is the University Day, when you can come and see, I guess, meet our students, meet Dr. Ali, Dr. Stephen, and hear about those capstone projects, or even come to campus tomorrow. The capstone project, the capstone presentations, I think, start at 5:30, right?
Yep, 5:30.
So come around 5, and make sure maybe call admissions beforehand, and then we'll arrange for your visit. So thank you for everyone who's been with us today. Tomorrow is our last webinar where we'll feature social sciences. And huge thanks to our students, Dima, to you from joining all the way from Poland, and to our faculty members, and of course, Dr. Ali, the department chair, for sharing your vision, your passion for this department. And wishing everyone now a nice evening. And for the audience, see you online tomorrow. Bye-bye.